Welcome to the digital airwaves of Stereophonic. If you're a regular listener to our show, you've no doubt noticed that we shine a spotlight on positive changes in the music and recording industries. Certainly, the increased visibility of women behind the board as engineers and producers is something to celebrate. We continue that narrative today with our future-forward guest, Lena Sutter, an accomplished recording and mix engineer who joins us from Wisconsin. Just 3 years ago, she graduated with honors, earning a master's degree in sound recording from Berklee College of Music. Now, in addition to managing the studio at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, she works in tandem with a diverse roster of artists and contributes artistically and technically to a vibrant musical community. This is Dan Kimpel. Lena Sutter, we're with you today in Wisconsin.
Yeah, this is my studio at the Pablo Center in Eau Claire, and it's nice to be calling in with sunny LA.
The Pablo Center takes its name from Pablo Picasso, I understand?
I believe so, yeah. The Pablo Center, it's this wonderful creative space in Eau Claire. It's only been around for a couple of years, but we get Broadway shows that come through here. They have a series that they just started that's release shows for local musicians. So pretty much everything from, the smallest bands to the biggest productions we have coming through, plus art galleries and 2 theaters here. It's a really amazing space.
I was looking at it online. It looks very comprehensive.
Yeah, it really is. I was so impressed the first time I came in here.
One of the things we were talking about before we went on with you is because we're Hollywood people, we tend to be a bit myopic sometimes, and we forget what vibrant musical communities exist sometimes in other parts of the country, and it's really great to see everything that's happening where you are, and so interesting to hear the musicians that are out there.
Yeah.
There's a real aesthetic, right?
There really is. And it's amazing to me. I lived in Chicago before this, and they have obviously an incredible music scene in Chicago, very diverse and creative and collaborative. But there's something about a small town music scene where everyone knows everyone, regardless of what genres you play. You get a lot of kind of, crossover where a drummer might be like mostly playing in punk bands, but then one day you see him playing with a jazz trio and you're like, wait, I didn't know you could do that. A lot of people have a lot of tricks in their bag. It's a fun place to be.
It's almost like a Northwoods noir kind of creative,
Yeah.
It's like folks spending a lot of time inside in cold winters, maybe expanding their minds thusly, driving the interstates. It's very internal. Yeah.
You almost kind of get like this duality of, these winters where you're inside a lot of times, kind of just creating maybe solo or with a small group of people. But then the summers, it's just like all outdoor shows, people playing music in the park. There's groups that just kind of host jams in outdoor spaces. And so you have this season of introspection and creativity on your own, and then you kind of get to like bring it into the world every spring. So I really enjoy the seasons of creativity.
Speaking of duality, in examining kind of, your progress, you do a lot of things and do them well. You have the musical side of what you do. You have the technical side of what you do. And then we have the educational side of what you do. So for a second, let's talk about the educational part of it. So you went to college at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Again, another town with an incredible musical dynamic.
Absolutely, yeah.
And worked on Acoustic Cafe, so that goes out to the world as well, correct?
Yeah, that was really exciting. That was the first time I think I kind of was in a real studio when I was working with Jeff Michael on those recordings. And that was such an interesting way to learn studio life because it was, was for radio. And so it was kind of, do or die. It wasn't like we could spend a whole week in the studio futzing around. It was somewhere in between studio life and live life.
Who are some of the artists that you worked with in that period?
By far and away, the most exciting one we had come through was Casey Musgraves, who was playing at the Ann Arbor Folk Festival, and that was a pretty cool session. Watching people who are that professional, musicians of that caliber, the way that they work together and click. That was such a cool learning moment for me. But we also had a lot of really interesting local bands come through. One that's a very popular band in the Midwest is the Accidentals. They were a really fun group to record in Acoustic Cafe. You're really testing my memory here. It feels like several lifetimes ago.
Well, those are good points of reference as well. Also in Ann Arbor, there was something called Leon's Loft. Do you know what that is?
I don't. I'm not familiar.
Oh, that's
with
interesting.
that.
Well, I think they did an episode of Acoustic Cafe from there at one point, and Sharon Van Etten was the guest, so I happened to watch that doing my research. But anyhow, above and beyond, you also teach recording, correct?
Yep, I teach recording and songwriting at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. That's kind of been my main gig here for the last 4 years or so. I have 2 studios, the studio at the Pablo Center, and then we have a control room for kind of all of the different theaters in the music school. That's a brand new space that's very cool. But we have a recording arts certificate, and I teach 2 classes in that are kind of designed to start from the very basics of what is sound, what is a microphone, and we go through recording, mixing, a little bit of mastering knowledge. We try and throw in a little synth knowledge, a little this, little that. Try and give everyone. I always tell my students, my goal is that you'll leave here knowing what to Google when you come in when you find a problem. But I started teaching songwriting last year as well, and we just introduced a songwriting certificate here, and that's been one of the most exciting and rewarding things that I've worked on in quite some time. It was just such a collaborative environment with all of these students, and they were turning out just such amazing songs that I was really inspired.
Your lyrics are amazing. Your solo record that you did, songs I wrote in college. The lyrical content is really interesting, and many times that's not. It's the case is that lyrics exist with music, but yours can actually be read almost like as poetry as well, which is interesting.
Thank you. I do take a lot of pride in my lyrics, and I spend a lot of time with them. And a lot of that, I feel like I can both contribute to. I listened to a lot of folk music growing up, and folk music. A lot of folk musicians are just such incredible storytellers. So that really found its way into my lyrics and my music. But I took a songwriting class when I was at the University of Michigan from Dick Siegel, and he really, really pushed us to try new things and taught me ways of editing my lyrics and changing the structure of my songs to really emphasize them. And that really helped me start developing my own techniques for how I approach writing.
I'm sure that informs a lot of what you do as an engineer as well. There's a lot of crossover in these worlds, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I find that the line between engineer and producer and songwriter, it gets blurrier and blurrier. But it's one of the things that I love about kind of working in a small scene is I get artists in a lot of different parts of their career. So sometimes people come in and they really have, bones of a song, and we can work together on some of the songwriting and producing aspects. Sometimes people come in and something's completely finished, and all we got to do is set up a couple mics and hit record. So
I work with colleges and the music education as well. And one of the colleges where I work, they have a recording program. They have a class, which is really interesting to me, called Studio Etiquette. Wow. Right? And it's sort of like how to act in a studio situation. Is that something?
Yeah.
How did you pick that up? You must have gotten that really early on, right?
I mean, yes and no. I think that no one taught it to me when I was an undergrad. I did my master's at Berklee Online, and I felt like we had more conversations about that than I ever kind of did in undergrad. And undergrad was so much about just being creative and learning the tools and learning the theory that I think sometimes some of that practical knowledge almost got lost. But it became so obvious that when you start working in a real studio, etiquette is everything. But for the most part, I tell my students, stay out of the way, be nice. Most of the time, that will get you pretty far.
Yeah, as you know, our producer, Lindsay Tomasic, managed Firehouse Recording in Pasadena, and she invited me into a session one time, and it was a legendary Rock and Roll Hall of Fame person who was producing a session. And kind of the trick on that was being invisible. Mm-hmm. It was just like, how do you become invisible in the studio? So I learned, I know how to do that. So yeah. Sometimes that's necessary,
Yeah. That and spend some time being invisible and trying to identify maybe the places where you can make yourself useful. That's something that I kind of picked up on fast, is like you sit in the back, you watch, and you say, well, maybe, maybe I could go help out with this, or maybe if they ask me to be the Pro Tools op, I'll do things a little differently because I think this might match this artist's workflow better. And just, trying to be observant and forward thinking.
Sure. Sometimes a well-placed bottled water at the right time is effective as well.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
We'll be right back after this. This season of Storyophonic is sponsored by Novation, creators of the iconic Launchpad and Launch Key MIDI controllers. Novation's creative instruments allow you to translate ideas into reality, channeling your artistic energy to create new music. Novation seeks to inspire. Visit novationmusic.com. So, circling back to what goes on in Eau Claire, Justin Vernon, Bon Iver. Mm-hmm. That's a community, a creative community that I understand, and I've been reading more about it and researching. I'm obviously very familiar with the music, but it's interesting to read about the community. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very creative community. Brian Eno has this thing that he talks about with the concept of scenius instead of individual genius, of people working together to become prolific. And I think that Bon Iver is such a good example of that. So many of the people involved, they grew up together. They went to high school together, and they were just playing at crappy dive bars together. They have been through a lot as musicians, as friends, as professionals, and all of that informs the way that they make music. And I think it's had to kind of come back to the small town scene. Like, I think that idea has just become so important to Eau Claire of scenius. We all kind of are. I like to think we're all trying to lift each other up and, make ourselves better musicians. And I think that starts from Bon Iver, which really, lit up the Eau Claire music scene, obviously.
There's a recording studio. Is it still the same studio, April Base? Is that the facility?
Yep. It's kind of been on pause-ish since COVID. various factors at play there. But it is there. I'm not sure necessarily what the future holds for it, but I hope that we keep making great records there. It's a beautiful space, just kind of out in the Wisconsin field. It's a great place to be creative and make music.
As I understand it, had been a veterinary clinic, and it has an indoor swimming pool that's been repurposed, right?
Yes, and it no longer has the swimming pool. I guess well before I came onto the scene, it was a vet clinic. I have kind of difficulty imagining it as anything other than a world-class studio at this point. They've put a lot of time and energy and money, of course, into making it a beautiful, beautiful space.
It looks amazing. I've saw some clips, and you can see it in the background. It looks fabulous.
Yeah, it is. And I think probably because we did some renovations quite recently, so I think it's probably even newer and shinier than those clips that you got to see.
The scenes in college communities and generally are pretty inclusive, and Ann Arbor I've spent time in. I know Ann Arbor. I haven't been to Eau Claire. I went to college in Bowling Green State University of Ohio, and it's also just a center for all kinds of creative thought. But you have real world stuff going on too, right? So I think it's a great balance.
Yeah, I love where I'm at in my career because I do have a balance, and I guess more than that, I have kind of no normal day. Right, every day is something new. Between either I'm doing something at work with the students here. Later today, I'm going to record a wind symphony. Which is something that I didn't really have any experience with recording orchestras or wind symphonies or anything like that until I got here, and so I get to do something like that. And then later this week, I'll be recording jazz. I work with students to make albums of all kinds, and then kind of on the side, I pick up interesting projects, things that people I want to work with, things I want to work on, and I just get to kind of choose what really lights my fire. Nice.
And when you were doing the Berklee project, I came across a band I think you had worked with. Sometimes recording places we use like guinea pig band, the expression, but you know what I'm saying, they'll have a test band that they kind of use on projects. It's a really good way for musicians to get studio experience if they can't afford studio time too.
Yeah. I definitely, when I was in grad school, I was hitting up a lot of local bands being like, I'll give you a recording session for free if, you can record this week because my assignment's due.
Were they suspicious? Like, what do you mean for free? Oh, yeah. You worked at Shure Microphones. Shure Microphones is like, that's a standard forever. And I believe one of the projects you worked on was at the MV88 Plus.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's a people's priced microphone. I was looking at it, right?
Yeah. That and the MV7, which is the microphone I'm using right now, those were really my babies when I worked at Shure. So my undergrad, I did sound engineering and electrical engineering at the University of Michigan. So I went to work for Shure as an electrical engineer doing digital signal processing. So basically on the MV7 88 Plus, right, we have EQs, compressors, limiters, auto level, different width parameters on the 88 Plus. And so my job was basically A, programming all of those modules, and then B, tuning them, which was honestly one of the really fun parts of the job. So, because I really felt like I got to use my audio engineer ears to be like, all right, like the MV7 has 3 speech modes on kind of its auto mode, like neutral, dark, and bright. So we spent a bunch of time recording all of these different people speaking into the microphone, tweaking the EQ, seeing what it sounded like, trying to make sure everything was, as applicable as it could be to a very wide set of use cases, which was a challenge, a really fun challenge.
Sure, microphones are great. I mean, I think back to, something like as simple as the SM58, which is pretty much indestructible. I mean, you could beat a club owner over the head with it and still make it work for the next set, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They actually, at the Shure headquarters, they have this like mic hall of fame, and in there they have like a couple of microphones they've one that was like on a space shuttle launch and still works, and one that was like in a club that burned down and still works, and all of these things in addition to all of their awards and wonderful products that they've made. But it's funny because then there's kind of like these mangled microphones that apparently will still put out sound. So
comes in very handy. Microphones are so interesting too. I mean, I know people out here who collect German-made microphones from the 30s and 40s. The tube microphones. They're incredibly expensive, but they're still very much in the mode,
Yeah. I mean, I think the further I get into my career, the more I become interested in like gear history and stuff like that. I just think it's so cool to see, in the last 100 years, basically, that we've gone from nothing to everyone having a microphone on them at all times, right? Like, we all have our phones, we all have our computers. Like, somehow recording has really become part of everyone's daily life. So getting to, go through and like learn about the generations of mics and how things change, and sometimes like even learning about how a single microphone changed, like the AKG 414. Like, it's changed so many times that there are so many different versions of that mic that are barely even the same microphone. The entire guts of it are different. It's crazy. So I really started nerding out about old microphones. I know Sylvia Massey has like the collection to end all collections. During COVID, she was doing some like virtual museum trips where she was showing them off and plugging them in and stuff. And I absolutely loved that. It was so fun.
Oh, it's very cool. Yes. I like the microphone very much myself, so it's part of my world, Yeah. And I know how to pronounce Neumann, so
there you go.
That's very helpful. Give me that Newman mic over there. No, get out of here, kid. Electrical engineering. You're a woman, and we love women. There's a bunch of women here in the studio. There's a little dog running around outside, and she too is a woman. We're seeing more women inclusive in the recording world and the music world right now than we have ever seen before. It's still obviously a different margin, but we're so happy to see all of that. Do people encourage you to go into, especially electrical engineering? I mean, it's sort of a interesting place to be,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I personally just got the recording bug at such a young age. Like, I kind of was playing around on different instruments and stuff, and I wanted to be able to write songs, so I wanted to be able to record things so I could, layer, basically. This is, when I was in middle school, I started getting into it. And I pretty immediately became interested in the technology. My goal for a long time was just to go into making gear somehow. I think at first I was thinking more in terms of like amps and maybe not pickups and things like that for guitar. But I did have a math teacher who was like, "Did you ever think about working for Shure?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I didn't." And that was my senior year of high school, I think. So after then, I kind of had, eyes on the prize. Shure, Bose, maybe JBL, all great companies to work for. And I was really lucky to end up at Shure. But yeah, I was encouraged, but but I also just found my own path, right? And I encourage others to always do the same, right?
You've spoken on panels about these issues as well, correct, in New York?
Yeah. I was really lucky to be part of the Women's Audio Mission Conference in, I think that was 2018. Feels a long time ago. But I did a talk on digital signal processing and, kind of what I did at Shure and how I got into it there. And it's so obvious to me that there are so many women who are interested but either don't know where to start or don't know kind of what skills they need to build up. I think Women's Audio Mission is doing some of the coolest work out there in California because they're training women to go work for audio companies, right? I think they have, at least in the past, I know they had a partnership with Dolby where they were training women specifically, trying to get them ready to go out and work in careers in audio. And I think we're seeing the effects of it. I think we're seeing more and more women, and the more women that you see in the field, the more women will say, I can do that too. So
sometimes we were looking at one panel and a point was made by one of the panelists that there are women here and we just need to now see them more.
Yeah.
You need to be aware of that. But when you look at the women who are excelling in this world, they are definitely numerous, but maybe just not their presence is not as dramatic. So now let's see them,
Yeah. And I mean, I think maybe this is just my perspective as like a youngin', but I think most of the people that we really hold up on the pedestal in the industry are people who have been doing it for a long time, and they've earned it, right? They've earned their positions on all of these panels, and the mix with the Masters YouTube channel and all these things, right? But I think if we're gonna really start celebrating diversity in the industry, we're gonna have to look towards younger generations, because there are so many talented people from so many different backgrounds coming up right now. And I think it'll be really exciting to see kind of where they all go in the next 10 years.
We like the youngin' perspective. We actually like the term youngin' a lot too. We use it often, but we like that perspective. And I believe that you are our youngest ever guest on Stereophonic.
Wow. I'm honored.
Yeah, and certainly present an amazing perspective for us. We ignore you at our peril, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
I think it's important. And I think that the cross-generational elements that inform music communities are really important,
Yeah. And I think it's really different trying to make a career in the music industry now than it was even 10 years ago, right? Like, it's changed so much. So I think going to have to keep... I know I already see my students, they use different DAWs. They have all of these YouTubers that they like to follow for sound and stuff that I'm like, I've never heard of this person. What are they saying? Is it true? So I keep learning from students who are only, a couple years younger than me. So it will be interesting to see as I get older. I hope that they keep giving me the youngin' perspective.
You hit the nail on the head with the music education part of it, though. That I know has served me, and that will continue to serve people if you're around the culture of young people.
Yeah. I'm already getting to the point where I'm afraid that I'm giving them outdated advice, though. I only finished my master's, 2.5 years ago, but sometimes I feel like I've been done with it for a decade.
We'll be right back after this. This season of Stereophonic is sponsored by Isotope, making innovative products that inspire and enable people to be creative using AI-powered tools for mixing, mastering, audio repair, and more. And by Odyssey, the leaders in planar magnetic technology. Odyssey delivers the best headphones money can buy. Odyssey is uncompromised audio. Certainly one of the big changes we see now, and I see so much editorial about this, it always says, is it a dream or is it a demon? Is it a master or is it a monster? And we're talking about AI. So now we'd like to get your perspective on what you see from your young'un standpoint.
Well, it's interesting. I have kind of been on a soapbox for a couple of years that like most of our plugins were probably going to go to some sort of machine learning just because it's way less CPU intensive if you're trying to do things like model an amplifier really accurately. And so those are instances where I think AI and machine learning are going to do us a lot of good. I also think that things like I love the way that iZotope is using AI. I love that they have their little assistant, if I'm like, I'm working on this piano sound and I want to go in and have it assist me with a piano sound. But it doesn't just like give you a black box of here's your new piano, like piano goes in, piano comes out. It shows you everything it's doing. So it's really, helpful for my students if they have no idea where to start. I tell them that's a fine place to start. It will show you some ideas. It will give you, it's the next stage of using presets, right? It's presets that's program dependent. So in that way, I think that there's a lot of ways we can use it as a stepping stone in education, in building skills, in making some of our digital signal processing a little more accurate to the analog world. Where it will leave us, I don't know. I still don't think AI could really mix. So I'm fine with that for now.
Well, that's interesting. That is where we see it. We do see references with mixes, though, or kind of dialing certain things in, or
Yeah.
Have you used it in a mix? Obviously, you've used it in a mix capacity as well. Or tried it out.
Yeah. Definitely. Sometimes it sounds great. Sometimes it sounds terrible. So it's just like any other tool.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure out how to use it. It's probably gonna be overused for a while, right? We're probably gonna start, especially like I think it's really tempting for younger musicians to reach for like the AI mastering tools because they mostly don't understand what mastering engineers do. So they're like, it's louder. It must be mastered. So I think for a long time, we might be hearing a lot of small, mid-level records using AI mastering. But hopefully either that gets much better or we move away from it.
Great.
Only time will tell.
Great. It's just one in any number of progressions that we've seen. And you said as you study the history of recording, you certainly see monolithic changes all across the board, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in all forms of technology, we tend to get really comfortable with what we have and forget that it used to not be this way, right? Like, I'm sure that there are plenty of old school recording engineers who thought DAWs were gonna ruin everything, right? There are still people who are like, oh, when you use a DAW, you never have to like make a decision until the last moment, right? You don't know how to edit things down, and that's maybe a fair critique sometimes, but for the most part, I would say that DAWs haven't ruined recording. Mostly they've made it better. They've made it more accessible. They've given us a lot of new tools, and AI will probably do the same thing.
I always found it interesting when there were programs that would make things sound like analog recording to use in digital technologies. Let's put a little of the hissing back into it. Let's put okay.
I know. Oh my gosh, the hiss always gets me. I'm like, I want the sound without the hiss. We can do that in digital.
Have you worked on like 2-inch machines?
A little bit. I when I was in high school, I went to a boarding school in New Mexico that had a small little studio, and we had this engineer come in from Santa Fe every week who kind of it was mostly for recording, college tapes and stuff. But I was obviously really into learning how to record and learning how to mix. So his name was David Cragen, and he came in and would show us kind of how to do this, how to do that. He had a 2-inch machine that he brought in for me to play with a little bit, for me to cut up some tape. Mostly I just played with kind of tape loops and not any sort of real recording session, but I did learn how to cut it, how to make an edit, and gave me a little bit of an appreciation for not having to do that every day.
Yeah, some things do get better over time.
Yes.
That's so interesting. When you did the conference in New York in 2018, Linda Perry was there as well.
Yeah.
Did you get to spend time with? Did you get to spend time with her?
I did. I got to chat with her quite a bit, and that was, I was maybe more starstruck than I've ever been. She's just one of those people who's so much larger than life that when you meet her in person, you're like, oh my gosh, you're real. But yeah, I really enjoyed talking to her. I really enjoyed listening to her perspective as a woman who's been very successful in different facets of the industry over her lifetime. And I think it was so clear to me that she's just never compromised on her ideas, her vision, her personality, and that's what's made her such a monolith.
True. She also doesn't like being interviewed. Yeah. I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't actually. Yeah. I didn't.
She hates it. I have interviewed her on a red carpet, but it took it took every bit of charm that I didn't have that or whatever, to make that happen. But that's she's Linda Perry, for God's sake, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's a great songwriter.
She can do what she wants.
Do whatever she wants.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite documentary series is the PBS Soundbreaking documentary, and she's featured heavily in that, in the way that she talks about producing Christina and some of that work. I learned so much from listening to her talk about her process.
Beautiful. The song "Beautiful" is just such a landmark. Love.
Yeah, and in Soundbreaking, she talks about it, about how important it was that it wasn't perfect, and how Christina really wanted to make it perfect, but she knew that was not the answer. The answer was to have something that was a little raw in the voice, a little crackly. And that's definitely something that I take into my recording sessions all the time of what is, how do we make something perfectly imperfect?
That's a great point. How do you make something perfectly imperfect? Is it... I know great stories of people singers running something down once for the first time, and that being it.
Yeah. My main focus is always just making my artists really comfortable, making sure that they're having fun. We're making music. It's not, it's supposed to be fun. A lot of times the studio gets so serious, intense, and it becomes less of a, the creative spark gets lost. And I think if, you loosen up, a lot of times I make my artists just get their wiggles out and just wiggle all over the place, feel kind of silly before they play. And I think a lot of times you just have to get in that zone, that creative zone.
Nice. I think especially for vocalists, sometimes it becomes a very different sort of process.
Yeah. Sylvia Massey is also the queen of that, of doing strange things with her artists to make them not focus on the fact that they're being recorded, even if it's just like standing on one leg while you sing or something like that, having something else to focus on. I've always really, Sylvia Massey's book about adventure recording is one that really inspired me early on. So,
who else inspired you?
Susan Rogers is a huge inspiration to me. She was one of my professors at Berklee, and she started working for Prince as an assistant and climbed the ranks and became, a trusted recording engineer for him, and then went on to make a bunch of hit records and have a very successful career as an engineer. And then at some point she was just like, all right, I've done this. Time for me to go back to school. And she got her, she started, I think, her undergrad at the age of 40. And now she has a PhD in acoustics and psychoacoustics, and just like is one of the foremost people in her field. And it's like you've done 2 full audio careers. It's amazing. So Susan Rogers is just an absolute, just a beautiful, beautiful human.
Yes. What other women folk in the technical realm have inspired you or kind of given you a light in the darkness?
Yeah. Terry Winston, the founder of Wham, she came to speak at the University of Michigan when I was there, and I felt, I remember when she was kind of talking about her background of tinkering with her dad in the garage on things and how it sparked her interest in the technical side of everything, and eventually kind of falling into audio and wanting to be a trailblazer. I just saw so much of, both my own story and what I wanted to be in her. And I think that Women's Audio Mission is just, again, one of the coolest organizations around. I'm so excited that they have had so much success.
Mentorship is interesting in our business, and that we have various mentors. And one of the things I learned over time is that I learned what to do many times from mentors. I also learned what not to do from mentors, Mm-hmm. So sometimes our mentors are, I'm going to say feet of clay, but, we're human beings, or people make professional decisions based on certain factors. Who mentored you? I mean, who do you really give credit to?
Yeah. I've had so many mentors over the years. David Cragen, the engineer who was working in Santa Fe, probably like my biggest mentor or early on, because he really sat down and explained the basics to me when I was basically just a kid. And without that, I don't think I would have had the foundation to go on and be so successful in undergrad, grad school, beyond. And just someone who absolutely never makes anyone feel stupid, no matter how stupid the question you ask is. Which is a great quality in a mentor. When I was in undergrad, I would say Chris Guzman, who works at the University of Michigan and is also a mastering engineer in the area. He was always a really good mentor to me. He always was kind of helping me find the next opportunity or do the next thing. And then even, beyond when I started teaching, he was someone who I kind of asked for some advice and had come, guest lecture in my class about mastering during COVID and some things. He's always been a really helpful person for me to touch base with in my career.
Cool. The teaching thing is so interesting. Again, that's another skill set that you apparently have.
I mean, it's one I've definitely had to cultivate. I am really lucky that I had such great teachers to emulate, I think, in undergrad, in grad school. Definitely learned some, what not to do things too, but I had so many good ideas of what helped me learn, what I saw helped my peers learn, that really informed the way that I teach.
Hard to predict the future, but are there other areas? I mean, what do you see up the road for you?
Well, right now I'm in the process, me and my husband are in the process of building a home studio. We bought a home last fall, and we have a giant unfinished attic that I'm hoping is going to become a pretty nice space. We have some pretty good plans for it, I think. So that's the first thing, is get the home studio up and running, and hopefully kind of take on more local clients and have a nice space to work out of there. But yeah, it is hard to predict the future. I definitely would not have guessed I would be teaching recording in Eau Claire 5 years ago. So it makes me hesitant to even say, what's 5 years in the future. But I do want to do more DSP. I want to I always kind of have plug-in ideas floating around in the back of my mind. And so I hope that one day I can actually create some of those and maybe make a couple of interesting, fun little creative plugins. But yeah, I just want to keep mixing mostly. I love sound. Whatever I do, it'll be relating to sound.
How long have you known our producer, Lindsay Tomasic? When did you meet her? Do you remember?
My whole life. Yeah.
Yes. So she's an inspiration to me. I'm sure she was an inspiration to you as well.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime I was feeling like, can I do this? Can I make a career in this industry? Is this for me? I would always be like, well, Lindsay's doing it. So I always had that person to look up towards, to know that the path was there, even if it wasn't always clear.
Yeah. Sometimes your desire to succeed has to be greater than your fear,
Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
Yeah, cool. Speaking of great lines, I saw a great line. I think it's your line. It belongs on a T-shirt. You don't have to be one of the boys to be one of the greats. Is that correct? Is that you? Did you say that?
I did say that. I said that in a video for Apogee in Women's History Month. I will stand by that 100 times out of 100.
That's wonderful. We'll take that with us as we go. I got to tell you, Lena Sutter, you're a bright light in this world, and we are so happy to have you as our guest on Storyophonic.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really had a good time.
Thank you for listening to Storyophonic. Our shows are recorded, produced, and mixed by Lindsay Tomasic. Kim Strand is our production director. Our theme song is by Dad'll-Light Mine. Give us a review on your favorite listening platform. Subscribe to us on YouTube. I'm Dan Kimpel on Storyophonic.